of United Healthcare, shot and killed.
The story exploded.
I was in disbelief.
I heard the name on the news.
Police arrested Luigi Manion.
You could see that it was not a professional hit.
Who is this guy?
It was December 4th, 2024 at approximately 6:44 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Early morning outside the New York Hilton Midtown, United Healthcare's parent company was holding its annual investors meeting. The people who attend these meetings aren't patients, they're power brokers. Wall Street investors, insurance executives, lobbyists, and analysts to gather and to discuss profits. Then there is Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, was arriving at the hotel for the United Health Group's annual investor conference. Lurking just 20 feet away, Luigi Manion is waiting, masked, hooded, watching. He's been standing there for minutes, unnoticed in the morning crowd. Then Luigi raises a homemade 3D printed Glock style pistol fitted with a suppressor. He fired 3 shots. In the process, looks like it got jammed and was able to fix it and shoot Brian in the back and calf. And just like that, Thompson was rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital, but was pronounced dead around 7:12 a.m. While Luigi fled via e-bike into Central Park, he got into a taxi and he made his escape, eventually leaving the city of New York and crossing into Pennsylvania before the manhunt was really on. This was calculated. He switched outfits, changed transit, used a fake name to check into a Manhattan hostel, then slipped out of the city. The level of detail that went into this assassination was astonishing and put into question who was this Luigi Manion figure. For 5 days, the manhunt stretched from the borough to borough, state to state, armed, dangerous, invisible. It was headlines everywhere. You must have heard about it. Then on December 9th, a break. 250 miles away in Altoona, Pennsylvania, a customer at McDonald's recognized him. Police moved fast. They surrounded the restaurant. No resistance, no statement, just quiet. On him, a suppressed ghost gun that he created, a handwritten manifesto, fake IDs, the same ammo used in the killing. Case closed, right? Well, not quite. Since that morning in Manhattan, he said almost nothing. But the system, it's been talking. He's now locked up at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. No bail, no release, no deals. He's facing charges on 2 fronts. He's got state and he's got federal. In New York, he's been charged with first-degree murder as an act of terrorism, along with weapons and forgery. He's pleaded not guilty. His defense team is pushing back, calling the charges unconstitutional and politically motivated, whatever that means. The next state court date is set for September 16, 2025, but it's the federal case that carries the real weight. Manion is also charged with interstate stalking, murder, and use of a silencer. The federal government is seeking the death penalty. His next hearing in that case is scheduled for December 5th. That is the federal case. And while the legal machine moves forward, something else is happening outside the courtroom. Public support for Manion is growing at a crazy pace. His legal defense fund has raised over $1 million from nearly 30,000 people. To some, he's a cold-blooded killer. To others, he's a messenger and in a weird way, a hero. A symbol what happens when a system breaks someone down long enough. But the real question isn't how he did it, it's why.
Hey guys, real quick, if you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe, and if you can't watch now, add it to your watch later playlist. Back to the video.
Now this is where the video really begins. So Luigi Manion didn't come from nowhere. He actually came from a system where life or death decisions aren't made by doctors, but by algorithms. And this is where he has a point. It's a system where getting sick means battling bureaucracy before you ever get treatment. In America, health insurance isn't really about healthcare. It's a business, and he really shed a light on this because one designed to profit from denial. In 2023 alone, the top 10 health insurance companies in the US brought in more than $45 billion in profits. That's more than double the annual budget of the World Health Organization. So we should be saving a lot of lives and getting them healthcare, right? Well, while they're breaking earning records, people were being denied care by the millions. A KFF survey found that nearly 1 in 5 insured adults, including you and myself, had a medical claim denied in the past year, and most had no idea how to challenge it. One example is the health insurance company Cigna, one of the biggest insurers, was caught using an algorithm that allowed its doctors to deny claims in just 1.2 seconds. They rejected over 300,000 claims in just 2 months, often without even opening a patient file. So that's reassuring, knowing that an AI system is deciding whether we're going to get the healthcare or not. And now look at United Healthcare, the company of the late Brian Thompson ran. It used its own AI system, which is NH Predict, to flag patients should be denied coverage. The internal audits found that nearly 90% those denials were eventually overturned, but only after appeals, which is on your behalf. Sometimes those appeals took years, and by then the patient was most likely dead. So let's take a quick tangent, because despite the tragedy that took place that morning, no, committing murder is never okay. So I condemn the actions of Luigi, who should face the consequences for killing someone. And with that being said, the bizarre silver lining throughout this entire attack is that Pandora's box has finally opened looking into these scandals. Healthcare providers. That an AI algorithm is literally given the power of life and death over people. And while patients wait weeks or months for basic approvals, CEOs were cashing in checks. In 2022, the average compensation for a health insurance CEO was $15.3 million. Brian Thompson personally made over $20 million salary, bonuses, stock-based, based on SEC information. So those decisions to delay, to deny, to optimize costs, these aren't glitches. They are a strategy. And they happen in boardrooms, unfortunately, in quarterly reports, in Zoom calls full of executives and Wall Street analysts, BlackRock investors, and the annual meetings like the one Brian was on his way to. Quite the irony. And the people who pay for those decisions aren't in the room. They're in emergency rooms waiting for approvals. They're at home reading denial letters. They're burying loved ones and fighting collection agencies, which is a nightmare. Many are prepared to go to the extreme lengths to protect those they love or themselves. Desperation will push people to their limits. If you've ever been in a position of being desperate, it really does things to you. And this is the machine that actually produced Luigi Manion, a machine that doesn't just fail people, it devours them and pushes them to the extreme. Now that we have this idea of Luigi Manion, the crime he paid, and these health insurance scams, we need to look into his background, because they call them claims, but what they really are lives. These aren't statistics. These are people denied help when they need it most. And these are the faces of denial. So Luigi Manion wasn't some isolated drifter with no roots. It's important to point out who he was. He actually came from one of Maryland's most prominent families. His grandfather, Nicholas Manion, had built Lorien Health Services, a network of senior living centers and family-owned resorts, country clubs, and real estate across the state. So this is a guy with wealthy background. His extended relatives included political figures like a cousin who served as state delegate. So the connections extend. But on paper, Manion was part of a well-connected, privileged world. He was also an Ivy League graduate, bright, charismatic. This is a smart guy and apparently very socially active. His future seemed limitless. Friends and roommates who have later recalled him as absolutely not a violent person, and described the shock when his name appeared in the headlines that he had killed Brian Thompson. But somewhere along the way, Manion's path darkened. He began to withdraw from friends, distance himself from relationships, and grew fixated on systemic failures in healthcare, we assume. And here's the crucial point, because his family had no direct ties to United Healthcare. No one was on their insurance plan. They didn't carry insurance through the company, and there's no evidence of a personal dispute that could explain such an extreme act. Maybe it was a friend we don't know about or another relative, but there is no direct evidence. And this is what investigators uncovered in his notes and writings, and even bullets etched with the phrases like delay, deny, depose. It's pretty obvious what he's echoing here. It's the accusations that are leveled by large health insurance companies. Manion wasn't just crashing out because of a denied claim for himself or his family. He was acting out of a broader resentment toward the system himself. He was using himself to set an example. And then comes the big question. The mystery investigators and those who knew him still can't answer. And that is, why did his entire social profile go dark in the last year before the attack? A lot of friends stopped hearing from him. His online presence all but disappeared. And by November, his own mother had reported him missing after 6 months of silence. So what exactly happened there? It's as if he had been preparing for something in total isolation. Some point to his back surgery in the mid-2023 as a turning point. He was struggling with chronic pain and frustration. Manion grew more withdrawn. His final traces online showed signs of radicalization, with posts aligning him with very much anti-establishment and conspiratorial voices. Then, pure silence. This is what makes this case so strange that ties into the greater healthcare scam taking place. This guy Luigi wasn't a man striking back over a personal grievance, but one man who saw the scamming and took matters into his own hands. And like I said, I'm gonna reiterate, you cannot commit crimes of murder even towards an organization that's doing something unlawful. One eye for an eye is always going to make each other blind. We can't just have vigilantes and turning this place into Gotham City where someone like Luigi thinks he's taking justice into his own hands. Even though these health insurance companies are disgusting with their lack of care or disregard for people paying for their service, violence is never the answer. So let's look into some of the worst healthcare insurances, and trust me when I say it's worse than you could ever imagine. Let's start at the top with United Healthcare, since this is where this whole story originates. There was a family in St. Louis who was taking their 5-year-old daughter in for an eye surgery, something pretty basic. It was pre-approved, everything was cleared with United Healthcare. But after the procedure, United Healthcare then decided, it's a bit expensive, and they reversed the authorization. They called it a billing error, and they hit him with a $13,000 bill. What are they left to do? Complain and hopefully they can be heard. And to give you an example too, most emergency rooms are underpaid. United reimbursed hospitals as little as $254 for services billed at $1,400, a pattern that led to multiple lawsuits and settlements. Again, same pattern emerging, having to take it to the court system, and hopefully their court and judge can hear them out and there can be some sort of compensation. Let's look at another one, Assurant Health. And I apologize for anyone hearing their health insurance company here because there's a lot of cases. An HIV positive man in South Carolina was dropped from his policy. The insurer claims fraud because he didn't disclose a common cold on an old form. The state Supreme Court disagreed. The jury awarded him $10 million. Finally, some sort of victory for the little guy, but it takes these extra steps of paying for lawyers to get something done. In another case, a man was denied trauma care after a car crash. This is why we have insurance. There was no reason for him, but Assurant Health stonewalled him and he won $37 million in punitive damages. So it begins to feel like these health insurance companies are not really there when you need them most. They will happily take your monthly payment from $250 to a couple thousand, but when situations go south, they are nowhere to be found. So comforting, the whole concept of what insurance means. Now let's look at Blue Cross Shield, a former insurance that I use. Thousands of breast cancer survivors in Louisiana were denied coverage for post-mastectomy reconstruction. A jury called it systemic abuse. The hospital that stood up to them won $420 million in damages. Thank God for the lawyers and these hospitals standing up for these people. One woman with stage 4 throat cancer was prescribed proton therapy, a modern target radiation. BCBS denied it. She took them to court. The judge said the company, quote, abused its discretion. The denial was overturned. Why is it that people that are having to fight for insurance that they paid for are spending more time and money on court cases than they are even guaranteed to win? There's zero guarantee. They might lose this case and lose even more money, and then they have the healthcare bill and they have to pay for legal expenses. Let's look at Centene Superior Health Plan. In Texas, an infant diagnosed with brain cancer was denied life-saving surgery. Superior Health Plan, a Centene subsidiary, said it wasn't medically necessary. The decision was reversed, but only after a media firestorm. So you have to get the public on your side or else they don't care. Again, this wasn't an outlier. Centene has paid over $200 million in settlements for Medicaid fraud, misleading networks, and overbilling. But these companies have the money, so you are not even getting a dent out of their overall income. You see the pattern, all these companies, as well as Molina Healthcare, HealthNet, each of these stories, which some of them I can't even go into because there's so many, they're all kind of different, but the pattern is the same. Deny the claim, blame the paperwork, hope the patient gives up or doesn't live long enough to appeal. You tell me, is this care? Or is this some corporate triage? And it's happening every day. 2010, President Barack Obama and Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, or as many of you know it, nicknamed Obamacare. Sounded like a great idea. The purpose was noble: expand coverage, protect people with pre-existing conditions, and make healthcare more affordable and closer to the idea of universal. But the way they designed it, that's where the mess began. The law forced every American to buy health insurance or face a penalty. The IRS mailed letters. States like California, New Jersey, where I lived, Massachusetts, and DC added their own punishments on top of what the IRS had. It was marketed as reform, but in practice, it felt more like protection money. However, what ended up happening was 9 years of people suffering where most people could not afford healthcare. And because of this, it wasn't until 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was signed by President Donald Trump that they finally eliminated the 2019 penalty if you were not covered. On a state level, there is still penalties if you do not have health insurance. So here it is, you pay or you're punished. And I know this personally firsthand when I lived in New Jersey because we were threatened with nearly $1,500 in penalties per person for not having insurance. Luckily we did, but we were warned of this. But the average plan cost over $500 per person. Families were trapped, either pay for coverage they couldn't afford or pay the state for the privilege of having nothing. What a concept. So picture it, kitchen tables across New Jersey covered in letters from the IRS and the state. Parents pulling out calculators. Do we pay rent this month or do we pay the penalty? Do we put food on the table or buy an insurance plan we barely are able to use? This is the reality for most Americans. It's so expensive these days and so many lawmakers never see this. For them, it's a number on a policy sheet. For families, it's nights of panic trying to figure out which bill will go unpaid and whether the state will come after them. And the icing on the top is that they're not even sure if the health insurance will cover them. So let's look at the wall of shame, the worst offenders, to make you all aware. If we look at this image, this was constructed by Majesty Palm. He's a top 1% commenter on Reddit. And I know Reddit has a mixed view of people, whether it could be very extreme conspiracy theorists or you can have some very interesting information. So take that as you will. But based off the data off the CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, he essentially compiled all the data on denial rates and made the list. And at number 1 was none other than United Healthcare at 33%. You didn't see the whole list there, going from Medicaid, Molina, Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, CareSource, Select Health, Anthem, Oscar, Superior Health, Christus, and Better Health Options, Celtic, and Kaiser. You can see they roughly range from 13% all the way to 33%. And a lot of time, these denial rates will end up where the doctor can essentially speak on the patient's behalf and appeal it. And sometimes they win and sometimes they don't. But the point to take away from this is it is a long process. And this long process ends up hurting the patient more in the long run. Because again, when it comes to medicine and healthcare, it usually has to do with something immediate. The longer you delay, the worse the outcome. So the fact that the denial rates are this high for a health insurance that you're paying is astounding. But before we declare it as a total failure and the worst in the world, let's ask a real question. Is there a better way? Let's see what the rest of the world is doing. I think a great example would be everyone likes to point to Canada because Canada runs a single payer system. That means the government pays the bills and everyone's covered. Cool. There are no co-pays, no deductibles, no surprise bills. It sounds ideal, but then you hit the wait list. On average, Canadians wait nearly 27 weeks, more than 6 months between getting a referral and actually receiving treatment. You ask maybe MRIs, you might have to wait 3 to 6 months to get one, depending on the province where you live. So many Canadians end up paying out of pocket for private clinics like we have in the US, especially for diagnostics or specialist consults, because the public system simply can't keep up. So Canada, in this case, still seems like a failure in many ways. Let's look at the UK. The NHS in the UK, the National Health Services, is fully public, universal. You get sick, you go in, no bills ever. But again, access is the issue. In 2023, over 7 million people in England were on the NHS waitlist. This is just the waitlist. In emergency departments, some patients wait over 12 hours just to be seen. Even cancer treatment can be delayed beyond safe timelines. So what do people do? A growing number, over 13% of UK adults, what do? They buy the private insurance on top of the NHS just to be seen faster. Because anything medical, it's dependent on time. And if you can't get things done, the person can die or the injury can get worse. Look at Germany. Germany uses a regulated non-profit insurance system. Everyone is required to have coverage, and insurers must operate within tight rules. Wait times are a lot shorter than the Canada or the UK, but here's the trade-off. Everyone pays around 14 to 15% of their income into the system through payroll deductions. It's not optionals, and you can't just shop around. Even in Germany, about 11% of the population carries private supplemental insurance to get better rooms, faster appointments, or access to top surgeons. That's like if you make $10,000, you're seeing $1,500 go to your health insurance, but it's not guaranteed fast. So what does this tell us all? These countries have brought into this idea universal healthcare. You hear it all the time among these congressmen and politicians, which sounds great on the surface because systems do a great job on covering everyone, it says. They reduce financial anxiety, they cut costs in administration, and they almost never leave someone bankrupt over a hospital stay, right? But coverage doesn't always mean access, and that's important because when something says free, doesn't mean fast. It might mean never. If you want to be seen quickly or have control over your care, you often have to end up paying on top of the universal system. So you're gonna wait months for cancer treatment when it's about life and death? I don't think so. I think you're gonna look for the best, and that's gonna require you to pay out of pocket. So yes, some countries have figured out a balance. They cover everyone, they reduce medical bankruptcies, they still leave room for private providers, which is good, but here's what they don't have. They don't have the flexibility like we have in the US. It's just fact. They don't offer freedom to opt out. Well, some states still allow this. A lot of them is required by law. But most importantly, they don't let you design your own path. So you're on the same train as everyone else. If you want to pay more for better health insurance, you can do that. If you want to pay less, you can pay less. If you want to switch providers, shop around, build a plan that fits your life, you can, which is a cool opportunity. That freedom is chaotic. It's confusing. It's often unfair, but it's also unique. And if we ever get it right, it might just be the best system in the world so far. That's why you can say in the same breath, the US healthcare system is a disaster, but it's also the best one there's out there. So now let's get back to Luigi because he didn't just start a movement with this shooting. Luigi didn't organize rallies or write manifestos. He didn't post videos. He didn't ask for support. He was a lone gunman, and his act lit a fuse of rage, silent rage that had been going on for years in building because every denied claim, every surprise bill, every family broken by a system that sells coverage but withholds care, it just did it. People didn't protest, they didn't mourn, they shared memes, they joked online, they called him a vigilante, a symbol, a mirror, almost like this Batman figure. And maybe that's the most brutal part. He pulled the trigger, but the system pulls it every day with denial letters. And it really brings up that conversation with the policy loopholes, with surprise bills, with quiet deaths in waiting rooms. Yes, Luigi's act was violent and it should be condemned. But for so many Americans, so is the silence, so is the paperwork, so is the line that says not covered. So what he did was extreme, but to some people watching from outside, buried in debt, out of options, it didn't feel alien. It felt familiar. It was crazy to see people on shows like Piers Morgan defend the killing of someone because of the company's bad policies.
Healthcare executive down with party balloons was on an X post that you commented on. Why would you be in such a celebratory mood about the execution of another human being? Aren't you supposed to be on the caring, sharing left where, you believe in the sanctity of life?
I do believe in the sanctity of life, and I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, because it feels...
If that doesn't reflect our current culture, I don't know what does, because it is just pure disgusting to see that. Even though I understand they are frustrated with these companies, and I totally get that, killing will never resolve anything. So this isn't a story about a killer. This is a story about what happens when no one listens until someone finally snaps. Yes, a conversation was started, but killing someone to bring attention to it should be the last thing that ever needs to be done to make it happen. So I hope this starts a conversation more than anything. And I just appreciate you for watching this video. My name's Alessi. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. If you can't watch now, add it to your watch later playlist. And I will see you in the next one.